afternoon, everybody. Also happy to see Frau Bundesminister Clara Geiwitz. I had a great opportunity and honor to cooperate with her in the Foundation for the Polish-German cooperation. And now, trying to answer your question, I was struggling, with which aspect of the Polish-German economic relationship should be discussed here. But I decided to go pretty wide, to focus on globalization, something that concerns us, both Poland and Germany, and might have a really great impact of the conditions of our countries in the coming years. So first of all, what is this creature, globalization? So actually, more or less, everybody knows that it's a process of deregulation, abolishing barriers between countries in order to achieve a common space for business, accepting universal shared rules. And the goal is to have fantastic, the best possible allocation of resources so that we have a driver of economic growth in that. However, for many years, we've been hearing about crisis of globalization, alter globalization, end of globalization, and recently, this is the newest buzzword, this is deglobalization. I think our German participants know what I'm talking about, because now the German media is full of this exactly buzzword. So my goal here first is to explain the reasons for the crisis of globalization we are talking about. So the first source of the crisis is the social dimension, in my opinion, and this is actually nothing really new. Because globalization has been under fire for decades because of exactly this problem, which means that some people benefit extraordinary from globalization because they dispose over very flexible factors of production like capital, so they can move where it's really profitable for them. And some of the people have no chance of take advantage of that. Even worse, they must accept losses. They suffer under globalization. So who is, for example, in the second group? Well, just we can mention here the so-called Rust Belt in the middle states of the United States. So the production escaped to China and left the people without work. So researchers have been dealing with this problem for years, and in some surveys there is a proof that opening to trade and investment has some side effects and must be considered if you analyze final outcome of the globalization. At the political level, the social dimension provokes the answer in form of populism and protectionism, as well, something that we can call now a new mercantilism, right? So this is also something that we have experienced in the United States after the victory of Donald Trump, but however, some elements remain until today. The second source of the crisis of globalization is located in the management level. So what I'm talking about here, actually, business in recent decades acted in globalization according to a very specific and actually simple logic. Move production where it is really cheap, the cheapest opportunity to produce. Also buy your products where it is cheap, inexpensive, so where low cost. Offshore logic should be leading here. As a result, companies have fallen into, say, a complexity trap. They created very complicated, long supply chains, and they function relatively smoothly in normal times. But when the shock in form of the pandemic hit the economies, they started to collapse. So suddenly it turned out that delivery is not only a matter of price, it simply may not be there, which causes the collapse of the entire production chain. So what was the reaction of the management level after the pandemic? So two things. First, shortening the chains, and second, differentiating them. Markus Brunnermeier called this in his book the resilience economics, so a kind of new form of organization, which is now in statu nascendi. And this change means to some extent that production returns home, although at the same time it is also more expensive. So in other words, offshore logic is being replaced by risk mitigation logic. Globalization is not disappearing in this form, but it's becoming different. The third dimension, the third source of the crisis is the policy level. So far, or at least say 2 years, 3 years ago, it had been assumed that building a global economic system is beneficial to all actors using rational logic. So even for non-democratic system, autocracies, it made all sense to accept a certain order and take care of its stability because it brought certain economic benefits and advantages. This was also, by the way, the logic of the German Wandel durch Handel, today mentioned not so often maybe, but now it's worth explaining that. In the long term, everyone should accept the minimum of rules that allows cooperation, and then all actors in a way transform, change. And the assumption was that non-democratic system will also change towards a more democratic, open, liberal societies. So doubts about this assumption have arisen with the strengthening of authoritarian regimes, also because of technological progress, which was offered by globalization. But the final blow was dealt by the Russian aggression in Ukraine. So it turned out that globalization can be used to weaken other countries, your counterparts, now enemies, by building dependencies disguised as economic cooperation. So this is really a big problem. So what will these sources of crisis lead us to? So several conclusions, there are several conclusions which do not immediately indicate an end of globalization, but rather a kind of different globalization. And here are 3 points. Firstly, what we can observe in the future is a change of economic paradigm, something that is quite often used by economists. Just like once Keynesian welfare state was such a paradigm, then neoliberalism. So today we observe expansion of something that is called new productivism. What does it mean at a relatively general level? So finance, consumerism, and globalism, so a kind of triangle created by Danny Roderick, an Turkish-American economist, will be replaced by production, work, and localism, but subordinated to economic logic. Still, it will be quite economic, but advantages will be sought at this relatively local level. In my opinion, this might also speed up the climate, the energy transformation. And second point, the form of globalization we will see in the coming years. I think 2 options are possible. Because to be honest, back to business as usual, as was in the past, I think it's not possible anymore. So the first option is globalization of platforms. What does it mean exactly? There will be kind of tectonic plates in the globalization in certain regions dominated by regional powers. And they will create their own hemisphere of rules. So what does it mean in practice? Imagine Volkswagen is now present in China, in Europe, and trying to work according to certain set of universal rules. So in the future, there will be Volkswagen China separated more or less from the European business, accepting political rules in China, even I would say employing prisoners, accepting subordinates to the political power of the party for the right of transferring, say, 30% of profit back to Europe. But these platforms will in a way try to cooperate by more sophisticated problem of globalization. Okay. So the second option is globalization of cloud. Yeah, I will end up in 2 minutes. So the globalization of clubs, which means that, say, the West is separating itself in a pretty consequent way from, say, Russia and China, and tries to create so-called club of democracies. Friendshoring, used by Janet Yellen, indicates this direction. Yeah? So this will be a politically organized globalization. And the last thing, what does it mean for us, for Poland and for Germany? So Germany has been one of the greatest beneficiaries of the post-war globalization. The new globalization means that many dependencies must be dropped, and the state has to start investing in global public goods, just like security. This will cost a lot of money. And German taxpayers should know that. For Poland, the globalization is important because of the links with the German economy. You mentioned, Marcin, close ties between these two countries, but also because the global economic system has become a drive of catching up process in the recent decades. So Poland needs to think about its own sources of growth in the next decades under the changing patterns of globalization. Thank you very much.